Ah, yes, we have returned yet again. Let us continue on from where we left off. So we had the creation of the world, and we had Adam being created, and then we had the genealogy from Adam down to Noah, and then we switch to the next page, and we're in a new chapter. We're in the chapter 6, is where we are now. So, Genesis 6:1, when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them. So when it's saying man, it's referring to human. I mean, we use the word human now. That's just something our society made to try to detract from man and the creation of, God's creation, others, whatever. It's just kind of a reskinning, a retooling, a socializing, just that different words for the same thing. Homo sapien, whatever you want to say. Anywho, they're frolicking about and breeding, and we have a lot of people around now, and a lot of women, children, so daughters. But there's an emphasis on them, and we'll see shortly. Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took wives of all they desired and chose. The sons of God, oh, who is that? Well, if we look at the Hebrew, uh, Benai for the sons, and Elohim, God, so the sons of God. What is that referring to? If you throw that into the artificial intelligence, I asked Google, and it said that that was referring to angels, which is what I knew before I threw it into Google and asked the AI. But that's generally the consensus on who the sons of God are, that this is like the angels seeing, that the women that are in existence now, that they're all pretty and nice and fair. That's what it means when it says fair. It's like old school way of a degree of attraction. So they're taking them as wives. So whether that was forcibly or consensually, maybe these angels were a bunch of pretty boys and they had powers of seduction, and the women went along with it. I mean, are you gonna take that dirty smelling man or the pretty angel? I mean, I don't know. I can't say. But whether it was consensual or it was a little bit more forced, I don't know. But either way, we got some sort of commingling here. With the took as wives, that's kind of like a partnership or some sort of relationship there. Genesis 6:3. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not forever dwell and strive with man, for he also is flesh, but his days shall be 120 years. So what's going on here? His days should be 120 years. Is that 120 years from when he says that's going to be the end of man, or is that just declaration of what the life expectancy of man's supposed to be, and that the reason why it was so much longer before was that the Spirit of God was dwelling with man, and that kind of prolonged his human corporeal existence, and it wasn't necessarily an environmental factor. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know what the answer is to that, but hopefully we'll figure that out more in context. Genesis 6:4, there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men and bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So what do we got going on here? We got a few things. We got giants, so when we hear the word giant, we think of like great big people, that they're just huge. Maybe they're huge in stature, huge in power. Maybe it was, they were, of superior intellect. Just very sharp, very powerful, strong individuals, ones that, we normal people would kind of cower in front of, just, from awe or the mystery of what powers they had, right? Or maybe it was just physical stature, but I would imagine that it was probably a multifaceted thing. Especially if it's like, as we see later with the sons of God, lived with the daughters of men. This was the angels breeding with the human women. So, if you were raised by an angel, he probably has access to a higher level of science and technology than a normal person would. So they would probably have a greater understanding or a diversity of understanding in the sciences than a conventional human father would. So it's I would expect that you would know a lot of things that normal people wouldn't, and that would add to the greatness and make you even more mighty for if it's beyond just physical stature and just being totally jacked, right? The men of old, men of renown, right? You know, because they were, you know, bigger, stronger, knew a lot more, that everyone kind of looked up to them. These were like the super dudes. Genesis 6:5. Oh, I should point out too that the word giants. Let's see here. What is it? What was that? 6:5, 6:4, 6:4 giants in the Hebrew. That's Nephil. So that's where the word Nephilim. You know, when you always hear people talk about, oh, there was Nephilim in the air, right? That's kind of where that line comes from. The Nephilim. That's what the Hebrew word is for those giants, those mighty men of renown. Genesis 6:5. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination and intention of all humanity thinking was only evil continually. So is this our Rule 34 of the Old Testament, that every evil act imaginable, everything that could be done that was evil and not permissive. Although you got to remember, at this current juncture in time, we do not have the law. We don't have the law's creation. So the act of following the law is a lot more difficult to do when you don't have the law penned down, telling you what is right and what is wrong. An absence of the Bible, an absence of the scripture leads to a lack of understanding of it due to not having it to read as a reference. We had God presumably teaching Adam while they were hanging out there in the garden. He probably telling him, you know, this, that, and the other thing. But the second that they're out of the garden and don't have a direct relationship with God, that it is much harder to understand right from wrong and know what is good and what is evil. Even with the knowledge of good and evil that was accumulated from the consumption of the said frozen fruit, forbidden fruit. And, you know, I was going to say, it's like the Rule 34 on the 4chan. Everything that is made, there is a pornographic, twisted form of it, right? That they probably took every act, everything that, you know, was good and what was pleasant, and twisted it into some evil, conniving, nasty thing, right? So we probably had a lot of sexual acts involving living, non-living creatures, and just the nastiest stuff you can possibly imagine. Crazy forms of torture and abuse, and just a degradation of the human race, like just a race to the bottom, a race to depravity. You know, what feels good, go and do it. And it's regardless if it hurts others or yourself or your family or any sort of relationship wise there. Like, you know, this is a world before they had the scriptures, they had the teaching, and the thousands of years of precedence set from said scriptures. So it's understandable to see like the wildness of man and just where it would go, to let loose the seals, right? Totally free and open and do whatever you want. And yeah, race to the bottom. Not a good thing. Not good at all. So it's understandable as to why everything got so messed up at this period of time. And the Lord's sitting back there. He's looking at it. He's like, what's going on? What's this madness? This is just insane. There's no limit to how evil men are. And it's just pure evil. There is no good. So then we get into Genesis 6:6. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved at heart. Of course. I mean, men without the law or understanding of what is good and what is right, well, not having a relationship with God, it's just pure chaos, pure evil. There's places in the world that the Bible has never gotten, and in many cases, I mean, we like to pretend to the noble savagery trope, right? Where it's like, oh well, they're probably good in their own way, and it's like, or they're cannibals, doing stuff with their sisters and stuff, like just totally messed up craziness. And I mean, they've never been taught, and this is just kind of their traditions. And oh well, you eat the dead bodies and you gain their power. It's like, no, that's not quite how that works. But that's what happens. The natural state of man, when he hasn't been, taught anything else, is just, a wild animal, a beast. And it's, and we like to romanticize and fantasize about, these cultures that haven't been interacted with as being some noble philosophical hierarchy, some perfection, type state. And, that's generally not the case. It's, ugh. Ew. So, I mean, you can understand, he regrets, right? Like, not really what he intended, and that's just not good. So, Genesis 6:7. So the Lord said, I will destroy, blot out, wipe away mankind, whom I have created from the face of the ground. Not only man, but the beast, the creeping things, and the bird of the air, for it grieves me, makes me regret that I have made them. Sorry, I suck at reading aloud. But he's seeing all this. He's just totally wicked. It's like, well, I'm not going to just wipe men out. I'm going to wipe everything out because it all sucks. Them and their whatever they're doing there, not so good, right? So here comes the rod of correction. And a lot of times when you're really out of bounds, you really need the rod, and it hits down hard, and it smites. Be careful. When you get corrected on a small thing, praise the Lord that it didn't have to come to something more severe. I mean, you always, we've all done it. Learn the lesson the hard way. But sometimes the hard way is too hard to bear, right? Like, people die, losing limbs, getting, severely maimed and whatever. And generally a lot of us, we're lucky enough that it never comes to that. But sometimes when you screw up, the rod of correction is just brutal, and that's what's happening here. If God's getting ready, he's going to say, oh, I'm going to do a little bit of correction here. Wipe them all out. But he's not going to wipe them all out because Genesis 6:8. But Noah found grace, favor in the eyes of the Lord. So there we go. There's probably billions of people here just misbehaving, acting like animals, doing unspeakable evils and atrocities, and we got one guy, Noah. Out of all of this, he's the only one that is the God sees in a favorable light, because he's, well, as we'll see here, Genesis 6:9. This is the history of the generations of Noah. Noah was a just and righteous man, blameless in his evil generation. Noah walked in habitual fellowship with God. So we got this guy, Noah. He's better than everybody else in his generation. He's righteous. And we'll find out more about righteousness later on when we get to, other chapters in the Bible. A lot more. There's the law, but there's more of a moral thing. We'll get there. It's not the simplest thing. I mean, it's not the most complicated thing in the world. But kind of having that living by faith and trusting in God to deliver, and kind of having a relationship with God based on trusting in God, right? Like it's not trusting in himself, knowing, and then there's the other part of righteousness too, and it's just knowing that you suck and that you're not that great, and that left on your own you're kind of screwed, and that you need help, right? That, trusting in God to get you through things. And he was the best of his generation, and he walked with God. He's like, well, should I do this? Shouldn't I do that? What should I do, Lord, right? Doesn't want to, hurt the people around him, because, without proper teaching and understanding of others, it's very easy to harm other people. You say something and you think it's just an offhand remark, but I mean, it could, just destroy someone else, their psyche or whatever, and abuses above imagination, or with respect to relationships like parent to child, right? That, it's very easy to kind of quash your kids and just remove all desire and life and hope out of them just by being a little bit too harsh and breaking them down. But that's not Noah here. Noah was a man that, pursued the Lord, and looked for understanding and how to be righteous and how to treat others. And, he was just a good old dude, right? He wanted the best. He wanted to treat his wife right and his kids right, and, his neighbors too. And he loved the Lord above all. Presumably. I think that, that's kind of what I understand from when it says where was it? Habitual fellowship, right? I think that's what that part there is trying to say. I could be completely wrong, but I think that's what's going on there. In Genesis 6:10, and Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we saw that in the previous chapter. It mentioned them in the genealogy. So he's got 3 sons. Genesis 6:11, the earth was depraved and putrid in God's sight, and the land was filled with violence, desecration, infringement, outrage, assault, and a lust for power. Always that lust for power. Everybody wants to be the master. Everybody wants to be the king. Have power over other people. Have what they say happen, and just, drunk with power. I mean, even Satan, he's kind of drunk on that as well. Everyone just wants to be like God and be in control because they think they can do it better, but they don't really have the full understanding of the full picture around them. So a lot of times it's just a question of perspective is why, we have this like lust for power, is because we don't really know exactly what's going on. And, the God might, in a lot of cases, have our best interest at, mind. And it's like, you give somebody too much and it can cripple them, it can overburden them, right? You think, oh, well, if I just had more money, things would be better. But, maybe if you did have more money, you would change as a person, be even more greedy than you are now, and just be a miserable old bat. So, I don't know. I think a lot of it is definitely perspective. And the other thing is, too, people grow in times of pain and suffering, right? When you're on the top, it's like you don't really examine things. You don't have that desperation, that, lust for life. So it's definitely, harder to be a rich person that has it all in many cases. I mean, you look at all the stars and all these like famous people, and it's like, they're cheating on their wives, hanging out with Epstein on their island, or doing all the fancy yacht stuff, breaking up, getting divorced. And it's just, they're so famous that they can't interact with normal people, and they're isolated. So they live a life of isolation with tremendous wealth and the ability to kind of do anything, but having no satisfaction in anything to do. And then they go and blow their brains out because, they're depressed. And then we pity them. It's like, oh, well, he was such a good person. And it's like, whatever. That's just kind of how it goes. And it's not the most fun thing in the world. Well, maybe it's fun, but definitely not the best outcome, as we'll see here. Genesis 6:12, and God looked upon the world and saw how degenerate, debased, and vicious it was. For all humanity was corrupted, had corrupted their ways upon the earth and lost their true direction. So here we go. We got people doing a bunch of crazy nonsense, fighting each other. When you have like that lust for power, what do? You go and beat someone down and then lord over them and try to, be the king of the village, king of the castle, be the ruler of the nation, just be super powerful. And we had murders going on, and just like everybody's just trying to fight around, and you know, presumably an extreme level of sexual depravity and just a lack of following God, a lack of understanding of other people, and just a lack of empathy. Just a miserable little thing. And it's just degenerate, debased, and, you know, mankind kind of lost their purpose and direction. And, you know, it's gotten to the point that the only way God corrected is to wipe it out and start over. And good thing we got Noah, or else none of us would be here. We would have just all been, well, we wouldn't have lived, so I guess nothing would have happened. But our ancestors would have all just died, and that would have been it. With no hope, no salvation. But that's not what ended up happening. 6:13, Genesis 6:13. God said to Noah, I intend to make an end of all flesh through men. The land is filled with violence, and behold, I will destroy them in their land. So we got this, like, just intense violence. That's what he tells Noah. He's going to wipe it all out. And then he gives him instructions. Genesis 6:14. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood or cypress wood, and make it in rooms, stalls, pens, coops, nests, cages, compartments, and cover it inside and out with pitch. So we got this gopher and cypress wood. I've seen videos before where people talk about gopher wood as maybe some wood that no longer exists now, that existed in the pre-flood state, because the environmental situation was a little bit different there, and we might have had, you know, better, stronger trees. And some of those fossilized, crazy big trees might have been the gopher wood. It doesn't matter if that is or isn't the case. We don't really know what gopher wood is now, but I think the idea of it being some wood that used to exist that doesn't exist now, sure, that sounds good. I mean, there's probably some, you know, details in there or whatever that, you know, have meaning, but when you're just kind of reading it over or whatever, it's like, you know, there's something deeper there, but it'll take a lot to find it, and we're not going to delve that deep into the history of gopher wood and what gopher wood is. We just know that it's some type of wood that he's going to make this ark out of. So he's going to make this ark out of wood, and it's going to have all these places in it to put all these animals, and it's covered inside and outside with pitch, and that just kind of makes it waterproof, so the thing doesn't just get waterlogged and sink or soak up all the water and rot and, you know, whatever. Just hold it all together, right? You know, pitch, it's like sap or something, or oil. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Well, it definitely matters, but not in this particular casual walk, I shall say. Where were we? 6:15. Genesis 6:15. And this is the way you are to make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, and its breadth shall be 50 cubits, and its height shall be 30 cubits. And then the translation says 450 feet by 75 feet by 45 feet. I don't really know how big that is. I use the metric system. It's the size of an American football. Well, it's bigger than an American football field, so it's pretty big. It's a good size. I don't know if it's like, is an American football field, are they the same size as like a European like soccer football field? We say soccer here. I don't know. We're not right about everything here in Canadistan, but it is what it is. So it's a big field. It's huge. It's a big boat. And I mean, if you needed some special lumber to make it, just to make it strong enough, yeah, sure, we got gopher wood. That'll work. I mean, if God made the heavens and the earth, if he's got some fancy wood here before the flood that, you know, Noah got to use to make this thing, and even if it was specially made just for this flood incidents, I mean, sure, why not? I mean, God knows the beginning from the end and the end from the beginning, right? Like, it's not unreasonable for him to set aside some special lumber to make an ark out of. So, Genesis 6:16. You shall make a roof or windows, a place for light, for the ark, and finish it to a cubit, at least 18 inches, above, and the door above. And the door of the ark you shall put on the side of it, and you shall make it with lower, second, and third stories. So we got a 3-story ark here, and it's got a side door on. It's like all those children's books, the way that they draw it. It's probably accurate enough. You know, it's a boat made out of wood. Oh, it's more of a raft, right? That's like they kind of, everything gets flooded and it just kind of floats around and doesn't do a whole lot. It's not like it's got a big, you know, Yamaha motor on the back of it and it has to get to a specific location. It just kind of bobs around on the water, right? And there was no floods, you know, before this time period, right? We didn't have rain and, you know, there's lakes or seas or whatever, but it's very doubtful that anyone had like the ability to swim. Maybe some people have learned how to swim, whatever, but as far as like survival goes, I don't think so. And it's like, you know, people survive shipwrecks, and, you know, so even if you could swim, you know, a couple hours, a couple days, you're done. There's no hope for you. And it, like if you had something that you grabbed a hold of that was floating, you might last a little bit longer. But for as long as this flood's gonna be, even if you somehow managed to survive the downpour of water that was probably a crushing level of downpour that was just tremendous, heavier rain than we've ever seen. Right? You know, even if you survive that portion of the flood, you're not going to survive that long and you're just going to, you know, get wiped out. But there was giants that existed after the flood, so I don't know. Maybe there was some more commingling later on. But that's just speculation, right? Whether it was people that survived, which I doubt. It would probably be more likely that they would be a new generation of the Nephilim. Those angels, they came back, those pretty boys, and impregnated a bunch of women. So we'll get to that later when we get to our boy there, King David. Man, that's exciting. Genesis 6:17. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy and make putrid all flesh under the heavens, in which are the breadth and span of life. Breath and span of life. Everything that is on the land shall die. So here we go. Everything's going to die. Yeah, he declares it, so that must mean it's going to happen. And that the chances of anyone surviving are none. Right? I mean, if God's going to declare it, I mean, he's going to do what he declares, because God is not a liar. He's not capable of lying. There's things God can't do. You know, God can't learn because he knows everything. And he can't lie because, well, he wouldn't be holy if he was a liar. Right? So everything was wiped out. Genesis 6:18. But I will establish my covenant, my promise, my pledge with you, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. There we go. They're getting their ticket to freedom and a promise from God that they get to survive this terrible outcome that's just going to putrefy the flesh and destroy everything. So this is just a great news for Noah and Noah's immediate family. Well, I guess his kids and their wives too. I guess that's still immediate, right? Genesis 6:19. And every living thing of flesh found on land you shall bring two of every sort into your ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Well, there we go. We got the commandment, the old one from the nursery rhymes. 2 by 2, they walked on the boat. Right? So when it talks about kinds, it's like, yeah, there's probably some dogs on there, right? But when we look at dogs and dog breeding, especially like the purebreds and all that fun stuff, you look at like the last 200 years and how much like these super fancy dog breeds have changed, and it's like tremendous. Selective breeding can really do a lot for making different types of dogs and dog breeds or whatever. So it's likely that there was just 2 dogs that went on there, and then when they got off the boat after the flood, that the different breeding habits or whatever probably made all into different wolves and standard house pet dogs and wild dogs and all that fun stuff that just kind of spread throughout the world, right? But it didn't necessarily mean that he had thousands of different dog breeds on the boat, right? I mean, that would kind of be ridiculous. And then the other aspect is too that, well, you know, the elephants, maybe he got the baby elephants and not the full-grown ones, so, you know, just to keep the amount. So the amount of animals that were going on the boat was probably a lot less because it's like, you know, you get those dogs and that makes all the different dog breeds, and you get the, you know, the animals at their smaller sizes, and that tremendously reduces the amount that you have to bring on. And the other thing with like selective breeding is like the amount of changes you get in animals. It's like, it's not millions of years, it's really fast. Like you look at horses and horse chariots, right? You know, you get like the Caesar era. You watch like Ben-Hur or something from that old era of like the Caesars and the gladiators and the horses and all the horse fighting. It was all done with chariots, right? They had the horse, they'd have the horse pull a chariot, and then you'd have a guy on the chariot, and maybe he had like a giant like trident or something, and like gave people the pokey pokey, or threw them or shot arrows or whatever. Maybe there's a couple people on the chariot, right? And the reason why they did that is horses weren't that big at that period of time, right? Whereas like in the medieval era, after like hundreds of years of selective breeding, the horses are a lot bigger, and then you got the knight on horseback charging down, sword in hand, to smite upon his enemies, right? So animals, they can change tremendously, right? The horses have gotten tremendously bigger. You know, a lot of these dog breeds, especially in the last couple 100 years, I mean, they're all so inbred and have like severe illnesses. It's like you see some of these videos on these like dog, you know, these like what was it, master breeds or whatever it is, what do you call purebreds, right? And it's like, oh well, you know, he's a show dog, he just won the award, and then they get him off like the show. They put an oxygen mask on the dog because it can't survive on its own because it can't breathe, or you get some other breed or something, and it's like its brain is getting crushed by its skull, and it's like just got terrible health problems. You know, you get these bigger dogs and like, oh well, he dislocated his hip, and it's like, well, that doesn't seem right. And then you get a common mutt, and the thing is just like invincible. It can like dodge bullets and transform, right? Just a total metamorphosis. So it's just wild and crazy just how much breeding can do and just how weak it can make things. When you only focus on one attribute and, you know, eliminate other ones, you make something that is just generally worse, right? To create the strongest thing, you want to have the highest level of genetic diversity, not this constrained thing. So I don't know. And then you get the regression to the mean, and then we kind of lose where we're going, and we're not making any progress in this. So Genesis 6:19, and of every living thing of the land, or sorry, of flesh found on land, you shall bring 2 by. Oh yeah, there's the 2 by 2. Okay, 6:20. 6:20. Of the fowls of the board, accordingly, owls and birds, accordingly to their kind. Beasts according to their kind, and every creeping thing on the ground of its kind. 2 of every sort come in with you, that they may be kept alive, right? So we got 2 of every kind. And it's like, well, you know, we're just gonna, when the boat lands, they're just gonna go free, and then they're gonna reproduce. And then with genetic diversity, as far as like different environments go or whatever, that we'll have a planet filled with all these crazy fancy animals, right? Like there's really not that many animals when you think of how many splinter off from other ones. And we have the same art director making them all, so that's just kind of how that works. Genesis 6:21. And also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and you shall collect and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. So there we go. They're bringing a whole pile of food on board just to feed them and the animals that come with them, and also probably for reseeding a lot of the land afterwards, right? That the seeds of these different plants or whatever will spread, and we'll get our corn back, and rice and bamboo, fruit seeds, strawberries, raspberries. I mean, some of those, they might just be splinters off as well. I don't know. It's kind of a long time ago when this all went down. Genesis 6:22. And Noah did all this. He did all that God commanded him. So there we go. We got Noah, the obedient, righteous one who follows God's instructions and does what he says. And, you know, it's going to work out good for him. Not so good for all those wicked people that are just having a good old time. So let that be a lesson. Anyway, that's the end of Genesis 6, so we'll pick this up in 7 later on. Till next time, stay awesome.